The first thing I want to comment about is the head, or what I'm going to call letter A, which is the melody and the chords underneath it. Now, the basic chord pattern is 16 bars of 6/4, and then you have a 4/4 bar, which is kind of a cadenza as well, where we'll talk about that later, and then you have 4 more bars of 6/4, so you've got basically a 16 bar tune with a cadenza linking a 4-bar tag. And as you noticed in the very beginning, the melody was played very straight. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, da da dum, etc., etc. And as we got towards the end of the first 16, I started changing the melody both note-wise and time-wise, and we'll bring up an example right now to show you. So this variation is meant to lead into the ultimate variation in this kind of music, which is improvisation. And let's talk about the first chorus, which follows right up there. It starts up in so on and so forth. Rather traditional time feeling, working basically with eighth notes. But as I get into the fourth bar, I lay down 3 bars of sound sheets. And we're going to listen to those right now and analyze what I've done and why I did it, because this is an abstract kind of attitude towards the time feeling, which departs rather radically from the first 3 bars of the chorus. So there you have an example of going, quote, out of the time for 3 bars and then back into the time, into the eighth notes after those 3 bars. And that sound sheet, incidentally, I define as playing scale clusters from a point of view of swiftness rather than a point of view of digging in or swinging. But at the same time, in my mind, I keep a line of where the time, the conventional time, is at all times, so I don't get separated from myself. During this first chorus, my 3rd string slipped out of tune, and we decided just to keep it the way it was, because it just kind of bended in there right before the cadenza on the harmonic from G flat to G natural. And if you want to play along with this solo, you'll have to use your own means from your own fertile brains to figure out how to play along with that one. Incidentally, there might be several parts of this solo and other solos on this record where you might want to play along with and do some harmony and or counterpoint, but we'll get to that later. Talking about the second chorus now, the idea that flows into the second chorus is da 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 da, and that E, which is held for 4 beats, is the beginning of the second improvised chorus. And some points I want to make about this second chorus are climax and anticlimax, creative involvement, and working all of that off against simplicity. That is to say, using your solo to start with something simple, like I've started off with a long 4-beat E in the second chorus, gone into eighth notes, and with the exception of going back to a quarter note, I went into 16th notes from the eighth notes. So I started getting involved with something that was originally very simple. And then, as if to come full circle, the ideas went back to eighth notes from 16th notes, back into half notes, and then finally, as we get to the 14th, 15th, and 16th bars of the second improvised chorus, I'm actually playing the melody and variations on the melody again. And then up comes a particular cluster that I want to isolate and talk about now. This particular run of notes has quite a history to it, and I want to comment a little bit on it. My first guitar teacher, a fellow from my hometown of Richland, Washington, named John LaChapelle, taught me this particular run in showing me some improvised jazz guitar playing when I was a teenager. And then later on, I took this run, or a run quite similar to it, off of a Wes Montgomery record. Anyway, the 11-note cluster from C running all the way up to F is almost that particular run, which may go all the way back to Charlie Christian, verbatim. Then I go up to the E flat and bring it down my own way, but it's all based on that particular traditional piece of jazz guitar literature. Now the point, additionally, in this bar is that you can take this run and turn it into an exercise. I believe I played it, let's say, with the fourth finger of my left hand on the 8th fret of the 6th string to get that initial C note. But you can take it anywhere you want, not only up and down the 6th string, but try to figure out how to play the same thing starting from the 5th and even the 4th string, with variations included. Here it is again. So the point being that exercises and improvisations are not separated by a huge barrier. Sometimes they're interchangeable, and one can help the other. After the second improvised chorus on Moon, we go into a segue of 4 bars, and that will give you kind of a chance to catch your breath. In my solo, I went do do down do 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 do, some quarter notes there, and then I let the basic track take over, and 2 bars later the basic track goes into an 8 feeling, but I wrote it out on your music paper as 4/4, and the lines that I play once we get into this 4/4 feeling are supposed to be more floating like lines, and eventually the basic track gets into kind of a suspension of B minor and variations of B minor, like B minor 9. You can get a lot of mileage out of the C sharp next to the D natural there, and from the floating pattern I get into almost a Chet Atkins, Simon and Garfunkel thing, where I'm trying to play with the pattern and kind of melt into it, and then I rise out of it with the A, B, D, E, do 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 do, note the accents all the way up, and actually I'm playing this whole thing to get more of a percussive effect rather than the notes. Note the accents are very strong. As a matter of fact, the last 4 notes there are more noteless, more pitchless than anything. They're just drum sounds. That goes into one more cadenza, and then because of the basic track's own improvisation during the performance of this piece, in my solo track I started playing with the basic track, got into some half notes, into some 8th notes, floated a little bit, and then took the melody out, answering this time. Instead of going da da da, I would go rest, 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 dee da da, like that, and that way we made still one more variation on a piece that started out very, very simple, but within the structure we had enough freedom to make enough complex variations to satisfy those who like complexity, and yet we came back, balanced it all out with nice trills on the end of the melody there. And finally, for those of you who are wondering, that low B that I got was done just simply by tuning down the tuning peg of the 6th string. Speaking of the note B, I mentioned earlier I was going to talk about the cadenza that occurs on the 17th bar, the 4/4 bar. And in the melody chorus, I think we have another example of something that could be a very good exercise. It's an augmented exercise that I put down on your music paper. You shouldn't have any trouble taking it off. It helps you get through the whole tone scale rather rapidly and rather cleanly if you practice it slowly in the beginning. Also, this particular cadenza, this whole tone feeling was played actually on a wrong chord. That is to say, the chord that I played, the B augmented over, is a G suspended over an F. And strictly speaking, this is not, I don't believe this is theoretically or technically correct, but in our kind of music, sometimes the hard and fast rules have to be thrown to the wind, because that particular cadenza it seems to fit because it came at the moment of spontaneous creation. And harmonically, the expression was there, even though it wasn't technically, you might say technically bona fide. So I hope you have as much fun working with Moon as I did in having fun putting it together for you. Good luck. On Octave, the point of the improvisation is not based so much on harmonic challenges, but rhythmic challenges. We have, after the intro, which is kind of put in there for you to tune up, get your E's together. After the intro, we have a pattern setup that repeats over and over again of 4/4 for 3 bars, and then 1 bar of 3/4. So this pattern goes for 4 revolutions, and then it goes 4/4 all the way, and then it goes back into the 3 bars of 4/4 and 1 bar of 3/4. You might even think of it as 15 metric units. But the whole point in working with basically an E minor scale is to work off of the rhythm and get into ways of improvising based on rhythmic foundations rather than harmonic foundations. The probably the strongest parts of the solo occur when I start playing from double B note to double D note. What I'm doing there is making sure that as no matter how many 16th notes are being played, I'm paying attention to where 1, that is to say the first beat of the first 3 of the 4/4 bars in the pattern, where 1 falls, and never losing my place. Now this occurs in another place where I'm doing 4-fingered runs, the first one starting on A. It's actually an exercise, but I'm getting these 4-fingered runs. Each 4-fingered run takes up 1 beat, so even though it's an uneven meter, I'm able to follow the beat very easily by paying very close attention to the basic track, which continues to repeat the pattern, making it easy for me to depend on beat 1 coming down and my coinciding with it. So I do this 4-fingered quote exercise unquote, and once again, here's an example of something that was showed to me by a guitar player of what you might consider another generation. His name was Andy Nelson. He showed me this. I asked him, what can I do to build up my technique? He said, do this. And so I eventually used this 4-fingered thing, with variations, of course, in my own improvisation. And this is what makes it rather unique. Coming out of this 4-fingered thing into a floating time feeling back into following with the pattern, that is to say, I'm going bump, 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 dee dee doo 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 doo. That's your basic rhythmic pattern that you have to work with. So you can play just about any note that you want to lay on top of the E minor mode when you're playing this. And there are several fast cadenza type runs which I've written out on your music paper, which you can work with, try to play along with the record if you wish, but you can also just use them for your own purposes. That is to say, I used to take solos off of records not only to be able to try to perform it, but just to see how an improviser's mind worked. This worked very, very good for me with Wes Montgomery, with Barney Kessel, with Tom Farlow, with lots and lots of guitarists like that, Jim Hall, Eric Clapton. I could go on forever, Jimi Hendrix. Taking these things off, note for note, not so much for the purpose of performing them, even though that's okay, but learning how the man thinks. So Octave is based on working with rhythmic challenges and the 15 metric units, and as long as you can get into the feel of the pattern with these accents coming on the ends of beats, that is to say, 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 1 again. So let me count that out a little bit slower for you so you won't have any problem understanding this 3 bars of 4/4 and 1 bar of 3/4. I'll give you 4 for nothing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 1. So, armed with those particular weapons, I hope that you can traverse the rhythmic wars that are presented to you by Octave. Also in Octave, we have a section that goes into 4/4 This came about as I was executing the basic track, going into 4/4 with some very, very beautiful chords, and I got into some more melodic statements, the most notable of which I can compare to Tim Hardin's song, Da 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 Da. If I Were a Carpenter. It's almost note for note that phrase from that song. However, I believe I put the timing a little bit different. And in this section, you can, once again, I hate to keep using the same word, but float as opposed to dig in, as I was earlier with the four-fingered exercises and the quick 16th notes going between B and D. You've always got to remember that to make an effective creative expression, you must try to utilize all the things, all your tools that make for contrast. And these contrast-inducing tools force you to make your own scenario every time you improvise, every time you play. And according to how you think and according to how well you concentrate, you can make your scenario as deep and eloquent as you are capable. I would like to thank all of you people out there, guitar players of all ages and all sexes, for creating the kind of exciting, dynamic atmosphere in the world of music today that makes it possible for all kinds of music, especially guitar music, no matter how sophisticated, no matter what style, to be presented to people who do want to learn about these things. The communicative element of records like this and of Guitar Player Magazine make it possible for people everywhere, in every country, to share in the growing knowledge of guitar literature that we are now amassing in order to help improve the standard of music for generations to come.